Wakanda Forever. Definitely a solemn and heartbreaking return to the world of Wakanda and the Black Panther. We knew it was going to be a tough one, but we were unsure how they were going to pull this movie off. Losing the star, losing the bright light that was Chadwick Boseman, and making a sequel to keep in the continuity of what is going on in the world of Marvel and the MCU.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was a very tall feat that they had to accomplish, and I feel like Ryan Coogler did the best at his ability to create a story around Wakanda, around everything that has happened. Now, for sure, you can definitely feel the absence of Chadwick Boseman, of T'Challa, in the movie, but they also give a somber feeling to it, as far as let's continue on, we will remember him and his legacy. And it does happen with these characters, we are going along the ride with these characters at the same time as it's happening.
It's a grieving process for
Yeah.
sure. The characters are grieving, the actors are grieving, we're grieving as fans, and just trying to move forward. And that's all you can do in a situation where there is loss. When you lose anybody, you figure out, how do we move forward? What path are you going to take? And I feel like Wakanda Forever definitely does shine a light on that point of grieving, that step that all of us eventually have to take when we lose a loved one, and how are we going to approach the future. And they do a good job here doing that, especially with Shuri. There's a darker side to Shuri that I'm surprised they actually dove into, because guess what? When it comes to grieving and loss, darkness does end up taking over your heart and your soul. And I feel like they do a good job at giving us a taste of that, to make it really feel like we're working with Shuri now. This is who we're riding or dying with. And they do a good job at adding that level to her character versus the first movie, which I feel like was fun and loving. And yes, she is incredibly intelligent, but here she definitely showed the strength over the brains.
I will say, don't expect going into this movie wanting action-packed all the way through, because it is very slow in some parts, and very, as you say, the grieving process can be a slow process, and we are taking that ride with all of the characters. At times we were kind of like, okay, let's kind of continue the story, because I feel like, one, we are grieving with the characters, but two, you also are trying to introduce new characters as well, so you kind of have to keep that jam-packed into the story. And it at times feels kind of jarring, because you're like, okay, you're grieving 1 minute, and then all of a sudden you're starting to learn about new characters the next, which I understand. They did a decent job at treading that fine line between the two, and I thought it was decent, but I will say that there are some slow parts in the movie.
Yeah, it definitely does feel solemn at times, a procession to get you through that grieving process. But when it comes to the additional storylines, characters, the world that's being introduced into this movie, it at times feels like there's two movies going on, and then these two are kind of intersecting in the middle, Wakanda and of course Namor. Namor, badass, I love him, he's incredible, especially when it comes to his dialogue delivery, his calm, his collectiveness, his coolness, because you're going up against Michael B. Jordan's character from the first movie. And with Namor, they end up doing the same thing here, except in a much different way. It's about his people, and he really does connect it well with the Wakandans in this story.
I also think that the story does fit into what Phase 4, well, at least some of Phase 4 is trying to say, which was about that grieving. You know, we started off with Wanda, and she was grieving, and she was going through all those steps of grieving, and we end Phase 4 with grieving and all the steps you go through, but people do go through it differently. We got to see that here with the characters, with Shuri, with Nakia, with Okoye, with M'Baku, all of them.
Missing the connection between T'Challa and Shuri, and T'Challa and Okoye, But seeing Shuri and Okoye kind of come together throughout this movie, I actually liked it better than when they were with Riri. Like, Riri was fine as an integration. I think Riri's badass and she's going to go really far with it.
Yeah.
But I kind of wanted to see more of those two girls. But then Riri was kind of there, and then she would throw some jokes at me, and I'm like, okay, well,
I was like, haha.
yeah, I didn't really. She felt like the third wheel. And granted, of course, you're going to have that third wheel mentality, but she did feel more shoehorned into the story versus some of the more organic growth that does end up happening in the movie.
I mean, there are other characters in the story that also feel like shoehorned, and when you get to those characters, you're like, okay, they kind of put it in there because you need that character to somewhat be there, so you don't forget that about that character until later, because they'll come later. But yeah, they're just kind of. But it was funny that they were there at the same time.
Now, the action scenes that they do end up having in this movie are great. It's utilization of the Dora Milaje, which I love. So seeing the Dora Milaje kick major ass, especially when it comes to their spears, like, I think they did a great job in showcasing the Dora Milaje once again in this movie.
For me, I thought that the fights that they had were kind of, the Marvel generic fights. So there wasn't really a whole lot that I was like, okay, well, we've kind of seen this before, but it's cool to see these characters do these stunts that we've never seen them do before.
Right.
But at the same time, I was like, okay, well, it's like a generic fight that you usually get in a Marvel movie.
Now the music, Ludwig Göransson, who has been kicking ass majorly more recently with many different properties, including The Mandalorian, but really shown during the first Black Panther, comes back again in this one.
See, for me, I feel like he really showed up. He's shown up. He came.
He kicked its ass.
Yeah, pretty much. He like utilizing that Black Panther score that we already know, but like twisting it a little bit for this story. I'm like, okay, I'm feeling it. Like, it was good.
Angela Bassett dominated in her role here.
So good.
Incredibly heartbreaking, heartfelt, and powerful, to the point where I feel like Angela Bassett was the one that ran in the forefront ahead of everybody in this movie for a majority of the movie too. It takes almost like an hour and a half before we even get down to the nitty gritty, I feel like, of Wakanda.
That's true.
So yeah, it's definitely a slower experience compared to the original Black Panther. I do prefer, obviously, when it comes to Chadwick Boseman and his inclusion as Black Panther, I prefer the first movie, but for what they were able to do with this movie, I feel for them. And it's great to see them all back on the screen, pulling it together to push forward, because that's what we all have to do when it comes to loss.
Make sure you bring your tissues, because there will be a lot of crying. I mean, I was like looking up in the ceiling sometimes, so I wasn't trying not to. Yeah, I was like trying not to cry. So definitely bring tissues if you are very prone or easy to cry like me.
There is nothing at the end of the movie after the credits are finished rolling. There's nothing there, so there's only a mid-credit scene that you need to stay for. But guys, we're looking forward to hearing what you think about Black Panther 2. Wakanda Forever when you watch it. If you've watched it, let us know what you thought in the comments below. You can also like and subscribe.
And did a thing on our Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, Discord.
All the social networking gin joints, you know where they are. Kick into the party. Fuel the party. Keep the party going on our Patreon. Thank you so much. And as always,
now it's time to say goodbye.
this party is over.
Bye.
Bye.